Hey YouTube, Jack here with Jack's Low Carb Journey, episode 29, and we are on day 60 of my personal journey. Get it out of the way right up front. Weight loss report for me since yesterday, another 0.4 of a pound. Weighed in this morning at 216 pounds. As y'all that follow this series know, I had a period of about 7-8 days where I kind of stuck in at the 218, 219, 218, 219 back and forth kind of plateau, and decided to do a week of carnivore this week, up my walking, do a few other things to jog loose of that plateau. Seems to have worked, and I've come down significantly in the past couple of days. Some of that I think would have happened anyway, but I'm a believer that when you're consistently getting a result you don't want, do something different and see what happens. At least for a few days, you can always go back to it. So that seems to have worked. Tomorrow is Friday. Friday I will probably break back into my standard keto with salads and stuff like that, or vegetables going on. Though I'm doing a little bit of non-carnivore this week because I'm doing the research I promised for you guys for soups. So yesterday I did a sausage, rabbit and ginger sausage soup. Don't worry, you can make it with any sausage. It was pretty outstanding. And today I'm going to be doing a cream of avocado and chorizo, beef chorizo soup, where you make your own beef chorizo. And I'm going to try that. I'm going to actually get on that as soon as I'm done with this video. So I'm going to try to make this one faster because it is now 1:56 p.m. I haven't eaten since about 6 o'clock last night. And I still got to make lunch, right? Starting with raw beef that has to turn into chorizo first. I'm kind of hungry. So what are we going to talk about today? I alluded to this yesterday. We're going to talk about the reality of net carbs versus total carbs versus carbohydrates that we count in keto. And I've said that there are people, and including people that I really respect, that say things like, well, you should count fiber as half a carb or whatever. And I just don't agree with that. And I have 7 reasons that does defy my OCD to not have 6 or 8 or 5 or 10 or anything like that. I don't like odd numbers, but sometimes odd numbers are the right number, so we're going to use them. I have 7 things that we need to talk about here to understand this. And the first one is that there's 2 types of fiber in the first place. There's soluble fiber and insoluble fiber. And soluble fiber is partially digested. When you consume it, it will turn into something akin to a gel. When it's in your stomach, in your small intestine, absolutely nothing will happen whatsoever to it as far as gaining calories. As it moves into your lower intestine, your large intestine, and lower portion of it, it will ferment to a degree. And you will get something called short-chain fatty acids that will contribute a small amount of calories. And it is a fraction of the calories that you would get if you were to look at them as a full carbohydrate or even a partial carbohydrate, because they'll only get so much before, you guessed it, they come out the other end. Now, the next thing you need to know is that most vegetables are between 70 to 80% insoluble fiber in their fiber content. Not all of them, but most of them. If you look up, for instance, arugula, one of my favorite greens, it's about 80% insoluble fiber, and then that means that about 20% of the remaining fiber is soluble fiber. And that's just the way it is. Now, some vegetables have more soluble fiber than that, but that's most of the greens that we, especially if we're talking about raw vegetation that we're eating, like cucumbers with the peels on them. Don't peel your cucumbers. There's no reason you need to peel a cucumber. Especially if you're eating an organic cucumber, you're throwing away the fiber, the insoluble fiber specifically. So that's just the way things are. So that brings us to our next thing, point 3. Point 3 is that insoluble fiber, which makes up the bulk of fiber in most of the things that you're eating, is completely non-digestible. You can't do anything with it. 100% of it forms bulk and comes out the other end of your ass. Literally. Got it? So most of the fiber that you're eating, if you're eating healthy keto, and we'll talk about the one gotcha when we get to the end, but most of it is simply not going to be a problem. It's not going to be anything you can do anything with. I'm sorry. And I've got some friends that are diabetic say, well, if I eat a bunch of fiber and I check my glucose, you're diabetic, first of all. So your numbers are not part of the control group for the rest of the world, especially as a type 1. But the other thing is food in your stomach will create an insulin and glucose response. There's other food that went with it. I highly doubt you ate 100% fiber only. Right? So this has been tested in labs. This is solid science, okay? And the insoluble, there's nothing that your body can do with it. All it is bulk for you to crap, and it helps you feel satiated, and that's good. Number 4, soluble fiber is partially digestible, but again, this occurs only in the lower intestine, and the reason that that's important is it has virtually no impact whatsoever on blood glucose levels, because the actual thing that you're getting out of it is a short-chain fatty acid that's pretty much usable as it is as energy. It's not quite the magic that an MCT or medium chain triglyceride is, but it is not going to significantly affect your blood sugar on any level. And it's not enough calories that, unless you're pushing the edge of what your caloric intake should be every day, that it's really going to matter, because it's a small portion of a small portion of a small portion. You see how that works? So that's number 5, honestly. It was converted to short-chain fatty acids, and these just don't affect your glucose levels. So I kind of rolled 2 of them together for you. Told you I'm hungry, trying to speed up here subconsciously. And that's just, again, this is biology, this is science, this is chemistry, this is how this works. I don't care that some people that I actually think know a lot more than me about a lot of things say you need to count them as half a carbohydrate. You don't, because it's just, this is how it works. And they'll even tell you that and then still tell you to do it. So I don't know what's going on there. The other thing you need to understand about soluble fiber is it actually acts as an offset to other carbohydrates. So it is likely the case, from everything I've read on the research, that for the little bit that it can add as far as a calorie and maybe then have some minor effect on blood glucose levels, it's already offset that, in that when you're eating something that has fiber in it, there's probably some actual carbs in it. So maybe you sit down to a meal and you have 7 carbs and then you have some fiber. Well, those 7 carbs are going to be used by the body as what they are, glucose. But when they're bound with soluble fiber, the ability of the body to get that glucose is restricted. There is some truth to what we call the glycemic index. Now, if you're eating 100 carbohydrates in a meal, it doesn't make a diddly piece, a tiny bit of rat shit that what the glycemic index is at that point. But when you're eating small amounts or reasonable amounts even of carbohydrates, and you're including soluble fiber, you will in fact impair the ability of those carbohydrates to be absorbed. And therefore, if later on, hours after you've eaten, there's a small amount of energy available in the form of short-chain fatty acids from your colon and sigmoid colon, it's not a big deal, and it doesn't really have much of an impact on your life. But the most important reason that you can pretty much, if you're doing a modern, healthy ketogenic diet, which is about 70 to 75% of your calories from fat, and then getting less than 20 net carbohydrates, and then getting the balance of your needs from protein, so you have sufficient protein. You can just do that and just forget about it. For the love of God, that's how the diets were developed. Everything that we're doing today comes from early pioneers that did less fat in their diets, like Atkins and Mary Dan and Michael Eads with Protein Power, etc. And they developed these diets specifically because they did result in ketosis. Now, maybe they didn't have as strong of a ketogenic effect when we upped the fat, because thereby cutting the protein, we reduced gluconeogenesis from the protein. But in the end, the idea that we can be in this state of ketosis and carbohydrate restriction with 20 net carbs, in the case of Mary Dan and Michael Eads with Protein Power, it's actually 21 carbohydrates a day, 7 per meal on their intervention phase, and then done with thousands upon thousands upon thousands of their supervised patients. Identifying that this works was done using the net carbohydrate number. So the truth is, if you wanted to count the fiber carbs at half, like I said yesterday, then what you would end up is with more carbs. And by the time, if you ate normal food without getting all creative, with trying to make fake treats and stuff like that, you would end up right back where you were, and you'd still be at about, if you went to your limit, 20 net carbs, if you were eating, let's say, a 30 carb, 35 carb limit, which is where you would end up if you did discounting fiber. In fact, a lot of macro calculators, you go to a guy my size, they're going to allocate to me 27 carbohydrates, even if I'm doing net carbs. And the diet was developed that way. It's the one place you can get yourself in trouble. And this is why I try to tell you to I'm not saying not to do it, but limit it. You can't be eating the keto treats and keto taco shells and keto crackers and keto all this other keto bread every day. Because a lot of those things rely on things that are unusually high in fiber. And if most of that fiber, in the case of something like, let's say, psyllium husk, which I do use to make a keto tortilla or flatbread, that's a lot of soluble fiber, and a fraction of a big number is still a considerable number. So those need to be things that we use in moderation, but not that we completely avoid or be afraid of. But day to day, when you're talking about you're eating, you're putting radishes in a soup and as a substitute for potato, or cauliflower in to a soup, I'm going to try a zuppa discana, which is what Olive Garden makes, and it's my freaking, like a lot of you guys, you want waffles and syrup, you want cookies, you want ice cream. I don't care. I'm not even tempted. But a basket of bread sticks and a zuppa discana at Olive Garden, and I only really want the bread because the soup's there. Yeah. I've seen some recipes, but I think I can do better with maybe pre-roasting the cauliflower, or maybe doing some things to season it and just putting the cauliflower in at the end to substitute for the potatoes, and then maybe using a Swiss chard in place of, like, if you're doing that, then you just eliminate the fiber, because again, when it comes to things like cauliflower, broccoli, asparagus, peppers, cucumbers, etc., not only do you only get a moderate little tiny pop of short chain fatty acids from the soluble fiber, most of the fiber's insoluble fiber, which is completely indigestible by the human body. I don't like the term settled science. I really don't, because I think it's used way too much in our modern world, because the entire point of science is to figure out that which we don't know. So until you're 100% sure of something in all ways that are possible, it's not settled science. The fact that when you eat insoluble fiber is literally what it means, right? That you will shit out 100% of what goes in, unfortunately for the guy that had to do the work, is a scientific fact that is settled, my friends. And there's some other things we're going to talk about that go into this insoluble or this soluble fiber world that are really beneficial. We're going to be talking about in the future. I don't know if it'll be tomorrow, but soon. We're going to talk about a little plant called Apius americano. Apius americana is a plant also known commonly as ground nut for my European folks. And we're not talking about peanuts here. This is a tuber. And the majority of the fiber in it is a form of insoluble or soluble fiber known as inulin. And inulin is incredibly beneficial with helping to maintain low blood sugar levels. So that might just make an amazing substitute for potatoes. And instead of having an ounce of potato, which is very little to do anything in something, maybe you can have 3 ounces or 4 ounces of Apius americana groundnut. The bad news, you'll probably have to grow them yourself. It'll take you 2 years to have your first crop. Good news for me, I've got them growing out there, and I've had them for a while. Anyway, I'll tell you more about inulin and that, probably not tomorrow, but sometime in the future. Tomorrow's Friday. I want to have a fun episode, but I'm going to go make me some chorizo and make me a creamy avocado and chorizo soup, and I'll let you know how that turned out tomorrow. And I am working on 4 or 5 soups so that I can do an episode with some keto soups that are a little bit different than all the other bullshit that everybody else is doing, which is just basically chicken soup without the noodles. We can do better than that. Excuse me, I promise you. It's time for me to go eat. You guys have a great day.